International news now.
All right, so we're going to start our news coverage today with a look at the Chinese Communist Party Congress, which is a week-long gathering of the party elite in China that's held every 5 years. This party Congress chooses the leadership of the country for the next 5 years. So at this party Congress last week, President Xi Jinping started his second five-year term as China's president and emerged as the most powerful Chinese leader in decades. He opened the Congress with a marathon, 3.5-hour speech outlining his vision for China.
You think it's hard to, get through an hour and 15 minutes of this class? Think of 3.5 hours.
Evidently, Bannon said that this was an adult speech to an adult. He liked the talk.
Of course.
Anyway, so one sign of President Xi's increased power is that his thought, meaning his writings, has been enshrined into the Chinese constitution. This honor has only been bestowed on two other Chinese leaders, Mao Zedong, the founder of the Chinese Communist Party, and Deng Xiaoping, the reformer that launched China's free market reforms beginning in the late 1970s. Now, this is extraordinary company and suggests that President Xi aspires to be the Mao Zedong of the 21st century. It also suggests, and this is important, that President Xi may not retire after his second term as president ends in 2022. Unlike other party congresses, no successor to the leader was named. And traditionally, Chinese presidents serve for 2 terms. Right. Now, this opens the possibility that Xi may not be subject to this convention of a limit of 2 terms. Alternatively, he may designate a loyal follower as a leader, but then continue to rule behind the scenes, like Vladimir Putin has done in Russia over the last 17 years. Now, the other important aspect of this party Congress is what President Xi plans to do with all the power he has amassed. His vision for China is one that explicitly rejects Western ideas about democracy and free speech in favor of Communist Party leadership in every aspect of social, political, and economic life. Now, Xi's China will increasingly be one in which the Communist Party controls every aspect of life in China: the economy, the internet, politics, culture, and religion. He calls on the party to be more responsive to people's needs by addressing such issues as pollution, education, healthcare, economic inequality, but the party and the party's dominance politically in society is not to be challenged. Now, such a vision contradicts long-held Western hopes that with economic development, China might experience and open up to pressures for increased political liberalization, individual freedoms, and even democracy over time.
Let's be clear that this is not the direction that China's taking. It's taking the exactly opposite direction. China arguably was more decentralized prior to President Xi, and is becoming increasingly re-centralized, and the stamp of one-party rule is really tightening here.
One-party rule and single-person rule, right? The prior presidents, there was much more a model of collective leadership in China, and he is centralized. And over the last 5 years, he's centralized power, and you can see that in the Congress last week. So in addition, President Xi's vision for China in the 21st century includes a desire to challenge the United States' preeminent role in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. Now, the goal is to emerge as a global superpower on its own terms. And this includes a more nationalist and assertive China with a stronger military. And Xi claims his country will not threaten the world, but will resolutely defend its interests. And so how is this different than prior presidents? The Chinese leadership is being more transparent in its desire to assume a superpower role. There was real caution on the part of the Chinese leaders in the mid-1990s and up through, say, 2003, 2004, 2005, and there was a discussion about a peaceful rise, and they said, no, this is too transparent in its challenge of the United States, and they stepped back from that. This is a shift, according to how they were talking about their role in the world, say, 5 to 10 years ago.
Right. There's greater nationalism as well associated with this. So let's now look at these developments and how they may affect U.S.-China relations, harkening back to our discussion of the hegemonic stability theory, power transition theory. And we're going to do so through a few clips of an interview with a former CIA analyst on China from NPR's NewsHour. And so let's roll the first clip, there.
Speech to the Party Congress last week, President Xi talked about the great rejuvenation. He wants to make China a global power.
Right.
At a time when President Trump is sort of pulling away the U.S. influence on the global stage. How is that going to play?
Well, it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, there's no doubt that President Xi sees opportunity in President Trump's isolationism, as some would put it. Right from the beginning, when the president was elected, there's a reason why Xi Jinping went to the Davos summit and talked about China's role increasingly as a defender of global rules and norms and multilateralism and climate change and global agenda. You know, this doesn't ring true when you look at it on the surface, but if the U.S. is pulling back and China sees opportunity, they're stepping into that vacuum. And Xi Jinping is telling us China not only expects to be a global power, they already are one and will start acting like one.
Okay, so let me make a couple of points here. First, note the interrelationship between American withdrawal from the global stage and China's more aggressive assertion of a more prominent global role. The United States' relative decline arguably has been associated with a relative decline in economic power over a long-term period. However, political leadership on global issues may, and a decline in that leadership on the part of the United States may be partly due to a conscious change in grand strategy by the United States rather than only a natural development driven by deeper systemic causes. In other words, the U.S. may be willingly handing over, at least partially, greater influence to China. This can be seen in the abandonment of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a regional trade agreement that was partly designed to maintain U.S. economic leadership in Asia. Climate change is another issue in which the United States took a leading role along with China under President Obama, but has subsequently stepped away from this obligation under President Trump. So we can talk a little bit more about that in just a second. China's ambitions, though, are not strictly economic. President Xi also has military and security aspirations, and so let's run another clip from this same interview that showcases these concerns for the United States.
Was there anything that happened at the Party Congress that concerns you about U.S.-Chinese relations?
You know, one of the things that I think is potentially concerning is Xi Jinping made a point of talking about this island building that they've been doing in the South China Sea. You know, this is typically something where China has conducted this activity but not wanted to draw attention to it. Xi Jinping talked proudly about it in his speech. This can be a dog whistle, if you will, for conservative elements here in the United States who believe that China is eagerly trying to push the United States out of the region.
Okay, so here's an instance, the struggle over for dominance over the South China Sea, where China is being assertive against the interests and preferences of the United States, as well as many of its regional neighbors. And China has built man-made islands to solidify its territorial claims to this vital region and shipping lanes. The U.S. has taken some steps to challenge China, but has not seemed to be able to thwart these moves. This latest very public pronouncement of these military claims of regional dominance from the Party Congress seems like another aspect of the growing struggle between China and the United States in the region that could cause some problems in the future. And finally, though, let's look at some areas of cooperation. Despite these problems, the U.S.-China relationship also includes a lot of interdependence, as noted in the module and the reading. So let's take a look at the prospect for some cooperation from this interview. Again.
You mentioned that the President Xi talks about multinational trading systems, and he also talks about climate change, both areas where President Trump is pulling away. Are there areas of possible cooperation between the United States and China?
I think the main area to look at is the economic relationship. President Trump is sure to tell President Xi, I need more help on the trade balance issue, and if you don't help me, I'm going to come after you through trade penalties and remedies. Xi Jinping has an opportunity. He's signaling a desire to slow down China's economy. This will be good for the United States and the globe in that concerns about a Chinese financial crisis that could cause us all a lot of trouble could be modified.
So, as noted in the pre-class module 16, there are a lot of strong economic connections that bind China and the United States together in a symbiotic relationship. They both need each other. The United States, China needs the United States to keep buying its goods. The United States needs China to provide it with cheap manufactured goods, but also to continue to buy and hold U.S. debt securities to help finance our deficit and national debt. Any tax cut that is being bandied about by Republicans right now would increase that relationship and need. Both sides would be significantly harmed by any type of trade war between the U.S. and China, so there's a lot of room for cooperation here. However, as the interview suggests, President Trump seems to approach even this more cooperative aspect of the relationship in a transactional way that includes threats as well as threats of punishment as well as hopes for cooperation.